Boy am I glad to finally be back to discuss more World Trigger. Among the anime's absence, I've been thinking a lot about the early half of the series, and one of the events that come to mind is the war arc. This type of arc in particular, when it comes to the shonen sphere, has always been a hot topic due to the highs and lows both in execution and narratively that occur throughout. Countless debates spawn from these conversations, and as such, today I'm stepping into a daring territory. I tend to be very cautious when bringing up the idea of perfection, as majority of the time it leads into heavy bias, but today that's exactly my intention. The After Crater Invasion or the After Crater War arc is one of Shonen Jump's best arcs that I would go as far as to say that is perfect. When looking at build-up, execution, stakes, and most importantly the fallout of events regarding the future of the series and how it affects it till this day, everything still passes with flying colors. A lot of people don't even know about this battle, no thanks to World Trigger's already underrated position around the globe, so we're putting some spotlight on the thorough planning and writing that is from Ashihara. Now first off, you have to ask yourself, what is in a war arc and what do you want from it? Majority of the time, war is described as a physical confrontation between sides, but it can also be a clash of multiple ideals and characters regarding positions or political motives. Regardless, the implication of characters confronting each other is clear, and as such, you expect to see the very livelihood of these characters tested in both life and in death, as well as seeing them evolve. What's more is that the world building itself tends to be affected on different scales, and typically is impacted to a point where things will never be the same again. Of course, great character moments and such adds flavor to the arc as a whole, but there are a lot of things that can contribute to the idea of a war arc. The one thing you don't want is to put your characters and world through such an impactful period and not yield anything from it. In Ashihara's case, you can tell that the process was refined and ensure that no potential was withheld. With that in mind, I want to first start by talking about the preparation phase leading up to the war. The concept doesn't just occur overnight, and as such gives room for all sorts of developments leading up to it. The basis of World Trigger deals with different nations that orbit around each other with their own goals, militaries, and alliances. Mikado City is naturally caught up in the mix, with it being the main setting of the story, and with it previously caught off guard in the first large-scale invasion, we already knew that it would not be the last. The second one being the war in question leads us to our developments in chapters 41 and 42 when looking at identifying who may be attacking. It's important to note that on-duty agents had spotted scouting drones, meaning that some form of attack is imminent and that meeting the forces head-on is key to minimize damage. As stated by Replica in chapter 42, at the time there were only 4 nations that were an approach to Earth. Number 1 being the marine nation Liberi, secondly the cavalry nation Leoforio, third the frozen superpower Kion, and lastly the largest military nation in the neighborhood, After Crater. Out of all of these, After Crater already had a ring to it because of its large military size. On top of the nation being narrowed down using context clues, they were the likely suspect to arrive. What's more is that the nation was last recorded to have a total of 13 black triggers, and while typically used for defense, can still be used on the aggression. We may not have been able to see the original invasion, but this upcoming battle would serve as proof as to how much border has improved since that event. Now, with the warning signs being addressed by the top brass, one of the most important moments of foreshadowing happens in chapter 43 with Jin and Shuji. When going back to the earlier chapters, we remember that Jin yielded Fujin in exchange for Yuma's safety due to the power struggle within border. Though the black trigger is Jin's ace in the hole, when paired with his side effect, he is not the only capable person of using it. Chapter 43 has Jin requesting Shuji to save Mikumo when the time comes in a crucial moment within the upcoming battle. In exchange for his assistance, he will be recommended to use Fujin, practically guaranteeing him the weapon as Jin's advice is taken with great consideration. Now this development would come to fruition in the climax of the battle, but let's keep in order before I get ahead of myself. With all of this established, let's talk about everyone's favorite S word and go through the stakes of the situation. There is nothing that sparks more controversy than a war arc that lacks tension and doesn't respect the stakes established. In terms of general knowledge, we know that civilian casualties as well as infrastructure are the go-to when it comes to war. Considering the first invasion claimed over 1,200 lives as well as 400 people missing, that also plays into public relations as well. Can't forget to mention that the kidnapping of agents is a major issue to focus on, as these nations tend to invade each other for resources and any type of political power gain. In the story's case, the very power system of the series is a source of energy within and everyone. Treon being a renewable source of energy, which can also range from small and large amounts depending on the person, can be a very valuable resource depending on the size of the haul or even just the person. In this second invasion, Chica was a major target of the army as her Treon size could power an entire planet if needed, thus thrusting our woman lead into a critical position in the story alongside the other C-rank agents targeted due to their triggers not having a bailout function. Even with the function, death is still a possibility as the base itself is not invincible, and to top it off, the more that capable agents are defeated, the tougher the battle becomes. A handful of stakes with a future yet undetermined even by Jin's foresight, and from chapter 43 or episode 22 in the anime, the battle takes off. One creative choice I thought was a nice addition for the anime was that at the end of every other episode would display a countdown timer to the crossroads of the future. It was a reminder that regardless of every victory or loss, it's not over till the crossroad occurs, and kept you coming back each week till the fateful moment arrives. With our stakes on the board and opposition identified, we can now dive into the thick of it with the execution. Like many war arcs, the battles are separated into multiple encounters among multiple groups and locations, with them each being moving pieces in terms of the momentum, where they start and how they end. In terms of Aftercrater, their forces are comprised of majority Treon soldiers, notably the rabbits, who took a lot more technique to kill and were also capable of capturing agents who could be transformed into a Treon cube state. Additionally, 6 humanoid neighbors, with majority being black trigger users, also joined the battle. This of course led to separate battles spread throughout Mikado City, with some results bleeding into others. Looking at border side, they have a mix of teams join the fray, with some heavy hitters still being absent. The following squads and solo agents were present: Tamakoma 1st and 2nd, Kazuma, Suwa, Suzunari 1st, Azuma, Kakizaki, Chano, Tachikawa, Arashiyama, Arafune, Miwa, and Kusakabe squad, as well as both S-ranks Jin and Almo alongside Director Shinada joined the battle. It's important to note that not every single member of every single squad was present, but for the sake of keeping things pretty easy to read, you get the point that at least one representative from said squads were present. From this point, we arrive at a blend of simultaneous matchups that play out for the entire war. First up, Tamakoma versus Hyuse and Visa, which then splits up into Yuma versus Visa and Jin versus Hyuse. Following behind them, Inadora deals with a combo of Kazuma squad and Suwa squad alongside Director Shinoda. Ranbanin is met with a combo of A-rankers such as Midorikawa, Yonya, and Izumi alongside B-rankers such as Azuma and Karuma. Finally, we have Mikumo, Replica, Shuji, and a mix of A-rank agents as they manage to arrive versus Hyrene and Mira. I don't necessarily want to do a play-by-play, as I rather respect your intelligence if you have watched the series, but I do want to discuss the highlights that made the victories happen for those who haven't watched to help understand what occurs. Starting with Ranbanin, for somebody who has both mobility and firepower, soloing him was not going to be possible. At the core of World Trigger's combat lies the essence of teamwork, and it took multiple agents from multiple teams in order to get this victory. Attackers working in unison while snipers and shooters aim to do lethal damage, constantly applying pressure and using the enemy's mobility against him, in which the trade-off of his movement was his accuracy. Yonya ends up defeating him after everyone contributes their shield to defend him from the Gatling fire, thus delivering the lethal blow. Regardless of what team you are on, being able to cooperate with multiple agents and work with their strengths is crucial in the heat of battle, and it just so happened that the most capable group of people were assembled in order to bring this opponent down. This wasn't a total victory, as Chano's squad alongside Taichi and all of Arafune's squad minus Arafune were forced to bail out. However, in terms of skill, more power players were still on the field, so the positives here did outweigh the negatives. The fight against Inadora is split into 2 parts, with the first being more on the intel gathering side at the cost of A-rank agent Kazuma. It becomes apparent that a group of attackers would be a poor matchup, and as such relies on the B-rank Suwa squad to use their ranged gunning skills to get the job done. Inadora's arrogance causes him to be led into a trap in which Suwa squad becomes unkillable for as long as they remain in the training room that restores Treon bodies if damaged. By using the intel gained by Kazuma squad and the time bought while in the room, Director Shinoda is able to arrive on the scene to assist in the effort of attacking Inadora's core, which had been a pain to land a lethal blow on. Combined efforts and information led to another victory for Border and a surprise betrayal from Aftercrater's own Mira. It's important to note that this battle also served for more more underhanded political tactics when looking at After Crater's situation back at home, but more on that in the aftermath section. Now getting into the main events, we arrive at Jin versus Ayuse and Yuma versus Visa. The 2-on-2 get separated into their own battles, in which Jin stalls Ayuse instead of outright beating him. Unknowingly at the time, Ashiara had a grand plan for this character regarding the future of the series, which we will also discuss in the aftermath section. As for Yuma versus Visa, this of course being the most notable fight in the entire arc, given a clash of two black triggers had yet to be seen till now. Before this fight, it's important to note that Reiji of Tamakoma First had been defeated by it and forced to bail out, meaning that no punches should be held. Yuma's battle knowledge, as well as his combination of seals known to be Chain, Anchor, Bolt, and Echo, were brought out to win this fight. However, not even his best plays could so easily defeat Visa, and what it came down to was utilizing the opponent's lack of information as well as a gamble of a lifetime. Yuma's current body already being made out of Trion lets him attack any other source no matter what. This crucial piece of information is what he gambles on in order to attack Visa with a lethal blow after gambling his black triggers used just enough to close the distance. This fight isn't necessarily about overwhelming power, but rather who can commit to the better outplay in the end, and in one of the hypest moments in the series, Yuma manages to come out on top one step ahead for the takedown. Had Yuma not been able to close the distance and apply an anchor seal, causing Visa's reaction time to be slow, that very well could have been the end of him that day. Thankfully, when it comes to craftiness, it's hard to outplay him. The major loss here is that Yuma is no longer in his suit, and as such can only use so many combinations of seals at a time with only so much Trion available at that. However, removing a black trigger user off the field is significant in terms of the tide of this battle as Yuma rushes to back up Mikumo. The final and key portion of the war rides on Mikumo and the combination of all available agents' efforts versus Mira and Hyrin. Before we get the ball rolling, we must acknowledge the fact that victory here is different compared to elsewhere. Halfway through all the battles, Chika does get turned into a Trion cube and becomes the target of protection, given her size clearly indicates that she could be the key to After Crater's victory. It goes without saying that the safest place she could be delivered to is the base, and so the objective changes for Mikumo to get Amatori back to the base as fast as possible. This of course is met with multiple obstacles from the rabbits as well as constantly being pursued by the last two black trigger users. Thankfully, those who manage to win in other places do find ways to trickle in bit by bit. Both Izumi and Kurasama are forced to bail out, but as foreshadowed by Jin way before this all kicked off, Miwa will come to be the MVP in this crucial final stretch, taking on both of the black trigger users for a brief moment and inflicting solid damage that will begin to cause slow Trion bleedouts on our last major targets. From this particular point, we are merely seconds away from the crossroads of the future occurring, and in order to ensure the best victory possible, we add on one more stake to the arc in a form of do or die. Replica ends up suggesting that in order to get After Crater to retreat once and for all, that he must be thrown in a portal directly towards their ship so that he could force a retreat via hacking. It's a choice to not be made lightly, but as leader and for the safety of Chika's future, it must be guaranteed. Within this final rush, it's all or nothing. From here, Mikumo is but steps away of the base, and to avoid taking any Trion damage, he deactivates his trigger, but at the same time opening himself to lethal damage. Simultaneously, the portal that Replica mentions opens up in front of him, and all remaining snipers alongside Kuga focus heavy fire on the captain. To top it off, Fujin comes out of nowhere from Shuji with a crazy cross-map hit that buys Replica just enough time to be thrown in and thus effectively ending the battle. Replica's last words to look after Yuma as his whereabouts now proceed to the unknown. Now from here, we must refer back to the underhanded politics at play here, where it was intentional that Hughes was to be left behind in order for hidden agendas to make way. With that being said, the winner is Border, as the rest of the high tier agents arrive to help clean up the rest of the soldiers. To put a clear set of stats on display, in terms of After Crater, they overall lost the war. All soldiers and officers were defeated, with Inadora being the main death. Additionally, Hughes was marooned and arrested by Border and placed in Tamakoma's custody. As for Border, 32 C-rank agents were captured and Mikumo was put into a coma. Furthermore, 6 operators in base were killed and Replica was bisected. Border definitely improved from their first major war, but all in all, I'd say that with so many hidden agendas in the works, that After Crater didn't lose as much in the grand scheme scheme either. I expect Ashihara to come full circle with this come the away mission, but for now, we're in test time. With the dust settled, we now arrive at the aftermath. People are very quick to call a war arc Mickey Mouse when nothing seems to stick to the setting of the story. That also applies to the characters as well. However, in World Trigger's case, we had developments that spiked interest across the board with no sort of backtracking or weak follow-up in sight. First off, Inadora was able to have his personality copied to a drone via his horns, and we were able to learn a lot about the situation abroad. This ties into Hiyusa's future, in which his pursuit to get back home to protect his master would cause him to eventually join Tamakoma 2 in the rank wars. Speaking of which, Tamakoma 2 gained another powerful fighter as well. Two competent neighbors back to back that spearheaded the final matches going into season 3. The most important development, however, lies at the post-war press conference with Border and the media. This section was one of the best moments of characterization for Mikumo, but also was a great showcase for how important public relations are in this series. The vital point of attack for After Crater was in the fact that the C-rank agents did not have the bailout function, which is a point of valid criticism because otherwise those who were captured or targeted would have been able to bail out. This fact ended up snowballing to the bigger question at hand as to how After Crater even knew about it, and from there the media came back to the first incident with Mikumo using his trigger back in school. What I like about this first off is the fact that we get to see the top brass actually use their wits and it isn't off screen. In fact, it's because we get to see this that we also get to see Mikumo take a stand in his own defense. Chapter 85 has Mikumo take a stand in front of the crowd who basically accuses him of recklessness, and while purely based on conjecture, Mikumo strikes up a very sound rebuttal, stating that if he were to wait for the right procedures and formalities that he would never get anything done in his lifetime. It's all about initiative, and he understands that he is no hero, and with that, he cannot provide this perfect result that everyone will be satisfied with, and that he can only do what he believes he should in the moment in a way that he will not regret later. This moment right here not only solidified Mikumo as a top tier main character for me, but also somebody who is worthy to be a leader. When facing life, you are going to be met with tons of unknowns in both situations and circumstances, and you can only respond in a way that matches your current capabilities. The icing on the cake here is what taking responsibility meant for him, and Border in this case, as the away mission ended up becoming public knowledge. A moment of opportunity to seize the appeal, and with Commander Kito's quick thinking, manages to dispel the crowd. Words are powerful from a wise man's mouth, and from here sets Mikumo on a new level of expectations from both the public and the top brass in terms of reaching the away mission test. Spoiler alert, but Tamakoma 2 absolutely crushed it. The last bit of this is of course the loss of Replica. It's a really bittersweet moment between Mikumo and Yuma, as Yuma acknowledges the fact that Replica did exactly what he requested to the end. Yet again, Yuma has had to depart with another close person in his life, and while it may not be forever, for it to happen so early in the series, you can't help but feel for him. We clearly see that Mikumo did. That said, the two from here really fall into a dynamic duo position as the rank wars resume not too much longer after. The war arc served up at such an early point in the series was merely the tip of the iceberg for what's to come in the future, and yet we got so much substance from just this one battle. Every encounter was well thought out and thorough, and those who got their victories earned it. The rules of the power system were used to its fullest, and in some cases very creatively, as nothing was convenient in the slightest. It started well, it proceeded consistently, and it stuck a concrete landing. The After Crater war arc is shonen at its very best, and even now still blows many wars out the water in my opinion, and once again proves just how good of a writer Ashihara is. People tend to have ups and downs with these types of arcs because there is so much going on and so many moving pieces pushing developments forward, but with World Trigger, it's nothing but highs and not a low in sight. Ashihara as a writer radiates competence from his setup to his outcomes, and even if you wanted to expose a flaw, he doesn't leave you any room to do so. It's impressive, especially with such a large cast, given balancing roles, relevancy, and screen time can be a very hard thing to juggle as time goes on. But when you manage to get results like this, where everything feels just right, you can't help but simply say to yourself that this is what true perfection looks like. With that, it's gonna bring me to the end of this video. As always, thank you very much for watching, and tune in next time as we look at the rank wars once more. Be sure to leave all your thoughts in the comment section down below. Until the next video.